We are now into the body of Plutarch's Lives, translated by John Dryden, revised by Arthur Hugh Clough. And we start with Theseus. As geographers, Saucius crowd into the edges of their maps parts of the world which they do not know about, adding notes in the margin to the effect that beyond this lies nothing but the sandy deserts full of wild beasts, unapproachable bogs, Scythian ice, or a frozen sea. So in this work of mine, in which I have compared the lives of the greatest men with one another, after passing through those periods which probable reasoning can reach to, and real history find footing in, I might very well say of those that are farther off, beyond this there is nothing but prodigies and fictions. The only inhabitants are the poets and inventors of fables. There is no credit or certainty any farther. Yet, after publishing an account of the Lycurgus, the lawgiver, and Numa, the king, I thought I might not without reason ascend as high as to Romulus, being brought by my history so near to his time. Considering, therefore, with myself, whom shall I set so great a man to face, or whom oppose who's equal to the place? As Aeschylus expresses it, I found none so fit as him that peopled the beautiful and far-famed city of Athens, to be set in opposition with the father of the invincible and renowned city of Rome. Let us hope that fable may, in what shall follow, so submit to the purifying processes of reason as to take the character of the exact history. In any case, however, where it shall be found contumeliously slighting credibility and refusing to be reduced to anything like probable fact, we shall beg that we may meet with candid readers, and such as will receive the indulgence with the stories of antiquity. Theseus seemed to me to resemble Romulus in many particulars. Both of them, born out of wedlock and a certain parentage, had the repute of being sprung from what they call gods. Both warriors that by all the worlds allowed, and I'm not sure what word he's using for gods, but it's that lesser thing under God, the angels and the demons, people call it, right? Both warriors that by which all the worlds allowed. Both of them united with strength of body and an equal vigor of mind, and of the two most famous cities of the world, the one built Rome and the other made Athens to be inhabited. Both stand charged with the rape of women. Neither of them could avoid domestic misfortunes nor jealousy at home, but towards the close of their lives are both of them said to have incurred great odium with their countrymen, if, that is, we may take the stories, least like poetry, as our guide to the truth. Now, even today, people are in this nonsense that, oh, if they're famous and they must have served us by being famous enough to excuse. No, it doesn't excuse the violation of the rights of others. Perhaps you can say their life was better overall, but that needs to be severely dealt with, and keeping them in high esteem and letting them go unpunished and whatnot. Just like, new news, as I was, encountering this, new news about some guy that, oh, everybody's about a pimp. It's like, well, yeah, that's one. But the guy did far worse than that. Should have been taken care of long ago, and no one wanted to, because he was the pimp to the famous people. Well, the rich and powerful, more likely, but yeah. The line of Theseus, by his father's side, ascends as high to Erechtheus and the first inhabitants of Attica. Because Jeffrey Epstein was a very important figure to the feminist and the whole body beautiful thing, rather than character and take care of yourself and actually be healthier and, probably better looking because you're healthier. There was that sort of thing going on. By his mother's side, he was descended of Pelops, for Pelops was the most powerful of all the kings of Peloponnesus, not so much by the greatness of his riches as the multitude of his children, having married many daughters to chief men and put many sons in places of command in the towns round about him, one of whom named Pittheus, two T's, I guess, grandfather to Theseus, was governor of the small city of the Troezenians, and had the repute of a man of the greatest knowledge and wisdom of his time, both things very honorable, which then, it seems, consisted chiefly in great maxims, such as the poet Hesiod got his great fame by in his book of Works and Days, and indeed among these is one that they ascribe to Pittheus: unto a friend suffice a stipulated price, which also Aristotle mentions in Euripides by calling Hippolytus, scholar of the holy Pittheus, shows the opinion that the world he had of him. Agius, being desirous of children, and consulting the oracle of Delphi, received the celebrated answer which forbade him the company of any women before his return to Athens. But the oracle, being so obscure as not to satisfy him that he was clearly forbid this, he went to Troezen and communicated to Pittheus the voice of the so-called god, which was in this manner: loose not the wineskin foot, thou chief of men, until to Athens thou art to come again. Pittheus, therefore, taking advantage from the obscurity of the oracle, prevailed upon him, it is uncertain whether by persuasion or deceit, to lie with his daughter Athra. Agius afterwards, knowing her whom he had lain with to be Pittheus's daughter, and suspecting her to be with child by him, left a sword and a pair of shoes, hiding them under a great stone that had a hollow in it exactly fitting them, and went away, making her only privy to it, and commanding her, if she brought forth a son, who, when he came to man's estate, should be able to lift up the stone and take away what he had left there, she should send him way to him with those things, with all secrecy, and with injunctions to him as much as possible to conceal his journey from everyone, for he greatly feared Plentida, who were continually mutinying against him, and despising him for his want of children, and they themselves being 50 brothers, all sons of Pallas. When Athra was delivered of a son, some say that he was immediately named Theseus, from the tokens which his father had put under the stone, others that he had received of his name afterwards at Athens. When Agius acknowledged him for his son, he was brought up under his grandfather Pittheus, and had a tutor and attendant set over him named Conidas, to whom the Athenians, even to this time, the day before the feast that is dedicated to Theseus, sacrifice a ram, giving this honor to his memory, upon much juster grounds than to Silanio and Parrhasius, for making pictures and statues of Theseus. Now, of course, we remember that the ram is, sort of the same symbol as the sheep, but the ram is the wild herd animal, perhaps the wild animal that could be led. The past couple years, we've definitely seen that more in play. Because for a while it was like, it was not even goats or sheep. It was like Americans were practically goats, and we were actually a stronger country when that happened. But anyways, there being then a custom for the Grecian youth upon their first coming to man's estate to go to Delphi and offer first fruits of their hair to the entity. Maybe I should just say entity. Theseus also went thither, and a place there for this day is yet named Thesia. As it is said from him, he clipped only the forepart of his head, as Homer says that Abantus did, and this sort of tonsure was from him named Theseus. Abantus first used it, not in imitation of the Arabians, as some imagine, nor of the Mysians, but because they were a warlike people and used to close fighting, and above all other nations accustomed to engage hand to hand, as Archilochus testifies in these verses. Slings shall not whirl, nor many arrows fly, but on the plain the battle joins, but swords man against man the deadly conflict try, as is the practice of Euboea's lords, skilled with the spear. Therefore, that they might not give their enemies a hold by their hair, they cut it in this manner. They write also that this was the reason why Alexander gave command to his captains that all the beards of the Macedonians should be shaved, as being the readiest hold for an enemy. And, we thus see a hallmark of pure fascism has long been the the shaving of the beard. I mean, it's not the only thing that people do that for, but the corporate stuff, yeah, and it's fascism. It's not required for the job actually, but it's sort of the thing that in this type of job we're clean shaven. It's like, whatever. Anyways, Athra for some time concealed the true patronage of Theseus, and a report was given out by Pittheus that he was begotten by Neptune, for the Troezenians pay Neptune the highest veneration. He is their tutelar entity. To him they offer all their first fruits, and in his honor stamp their money with the trident. Theseus displaying not only great strength of body, but equal bravery, and a quickness alike, and a force of understanding, his mother Athra conducting him to the stone, and informing him who was his true father, commanded him to take from thence the tokens that Agius had left, and sail to Athens. He without any difficulty set himself to the stone and lifted it up, but refused to take his journey by sea, though it was much the safer way, and though his mother and grandfather begged him to do so, for it was at that time very dangerous to go by the land on the road to Athens, no part of it being free from robbers and murderers. That age produced a sort of men, in force of hand and swiftness of foot, that strength of body excelling the ordinary rate, and wholly incapable of fatigue. That part's obviously a exaggeration, but yeah, that people can get to the point where they can work all day. Making use, however, of these gifts of nature to no good or profitable purpose for mankind, but rejoicing and priding themselves in insolence, and taking the benefit of their superior strength in the exercise of inhumanity and cruelty, and in seizing, forcing, and committing all manner of outrages upon everything that fell into their hands, all respect for others, all justice, they thought, all equity and humanity, though naturally lauded by common people, either out of the want or courage to commit injuries, or fear to receive them, yet no way concerned those who were strong enough to win for themselves. Some of these Hercules destroyed and cut off in his passage through these countries, but some, escaping his notice while he was passing by, fled and hid themselves, or else were spared by him in contempt of their abject submission. And after that Hercules fell into misfortune, and having slain Iphitus, retired to Lydia, and for a long time was there to slave to Omphale, a punishment which he had imposed upon himself for the murder. Then indeed Lydia enjoyed high peace and security, but in Greece and the countries round about it, the like villainies again revived and broke out, there being none to repress or chastise them. It was therefore a very hazardous journey to travel by land from Athens to Peloponnesus, and Pittheus, giving him an exact account of each of the robbers and villains, their strength, and the cruelty they used to all strangers, tried to persuade Theseus to go by sea, but he, it seems, had long since been secretly fired by the glory of Hercules, held him in the highest estimation, and was never more satisfied than in listening to any that gave an account of him, especially those that had seen him or had been present at any action or saying of his, so that he was altogether in the same state of feeling as in after ages Themistocles was, when he had said that he could not sleep for the trophy of Miltiades, entertaining such admiration for the virtue of Hercules, that in the night his dreams were all of that hero's actions, and in the day a continual emulation stirred him up to perform the like. Besides, they were related, being born of cousins germain, for Athra was the daughter of Pittheus, and Alcmena of Lycidic and Lycides, and Pittheus were brother and sister, children of Hippodamia and Pelops. He thought it therefore a dishonorable thing, and not to be endured, that Hercules should go out everywhere, and purge both land and sea from wicked men, and he himself should fly from the like adventures that actually came in his way, disgracing his reputed father by a mean flight by sea, and not showing his true one as good evidence of the greatness of his birth by noble and worthy actions, as by the token that he brought with him, the shoes and the sword. With this mind and these thoughts he set forward with a design to do injury to nobody, but to repel and revenge himself of all those that should offer any. And first of all, in a set combat, he slew Periphetes in the neighborhood of Epidaurus, who used a club for his arms, and from thence had the name of Corionetus, or the club-bearer, who seized upon him and forbade him to go forward in his journey. Being pleased with the club, he took it, and made it his weapon, continuing to use it as Hercules did the lion's skin, on whose shoulders that served to prove how huge a beast he had killed, and to the same end Theseus carried about him this club, overcome indeed by him, but now in his hands invincible. Passing on further towards the isthmus of Peloponnesus, he slew Sinis, often surnamed the Bender of Pines, after the same manner in which he himself had destroyed many others before, and this he did without having either practice or ever learnt the art of bending these trees, to show that natural strength is above all art. This Sinis had a daughter of remarkable beauty and stature, called Perigune, who, when her father was killed, fled, and was sought after everywhere by Theseus, and coming into a place overgrown with brush, shrubs, and asparagus thorn, there, in childlike, innocent manner, prayed and begged them, as if they understood her, to give her shelter, with vows that if she escaped, she would never cut them down, nor burn them. But Theseus, calling upon her and giving her his promise that he would use her with respect and offer her no injury, she came forth, and in due time bore him a son, named Melanippus, but afterwards was married to Dioneus, the son of Eurytus the Oecalian, Theseus himself giving her to him. Eoxus, the son of this Melanippus, who was born to Theseus, occupied Ornyetus in the colony and carried with him into Caria, whence it is a family usage amongst the people called Eoxids, both male and female, never to burn either shrubs or asparagus thorn, but to respect and honor them. Now, certain herbs and certain maybe animal items, maybe mineral. There's a lot of family taboos that have been invented for some of it's just plain gypped, some of it's tagoot, if you know those terms. Tagoot, it's the back T. But, well, at least he's being honest about the whole use thing. But the, let me use you for sex and you won't get injured. That's rape. Doesn't that sound like rape? And is that what they're accusing him? If he, some warrior threatens and gets his way. And they know that's not, regardless of the situation, people like that know that it's not consensual. I didn't rape that person. No. Anybody pulls that, The Cromyonian which they called Thaa, was a savage and formidable wild beast, by no means an enemy to be despised. Theseus killed her, going out of his way on purpose to meet and engage her, so that he might not seem to perform all his great exploits out of mere necessity, being also of opinion that it was the part of a brave man to chastise villainous and wicked men when attacked by them, but to seek out and overcome the more noble wild beast. Others relate that Thaa was a woman, a robber full of cruelty and lust that lived in Crumyon, and had the name of Sow given her from the foulness of her life and manners, and afterwards was killed by Theseus. He slew also Sciron upon the borders of Megara, casting him down from the rocks, being, as most report, a notorious robber of all passengers, and, as others add, accustomed out of insolence and wantonness to stretch forth his feet to strangers, commanding them to wash them, and then, while they did it, with a kick to send them down the rock into the sea. The writers of Megara, however, in contradistinction to the received report, as Simonides expresses it, fighting with all antiquity, contend that Sciron was neither a robber nor doer of violence, but a punisher of all such, and the relative and friend of good and just men. For Acus, they say, was ever esteemed a man of the greatest sanctity of all the Greeks, and Ciclius, Creus, I don't know. It's not in Greek, so forgive me my pronunciation. Salaminian was honored at Athens with divine worship, and the virtues of Peleus and Telamon were not unknown to anyone. Yeah. So, how this, how these stories get passed on, I guess, what after the fact, and it was like a secret, and it's like, but even if it's not known, oh no, I would never do that. Stand in front of me before this cliff, and don't stand high, and just over this edge of this building, or it's like, people are that stupid, I guess. Now Sciron was son-in-law to Cycreus, father-in-law to Acus, and grandfather to Peleus and Telamon, who were both of them the sons of Endice, the daughter of Sciron to Chariclo. It was not profitable, therefore, that the best of men should make these alliances with one who was worst, giving and receiving mutually what was of greatest value and most dear to them. Theseus, by their account, did not slay Sciron in his first journey to Athens, but afterwards when he took Eleusis, a city of the Megarians, having circumvented Diocles the governor. Such are the contradictions in this story. In Eleusis he killed Cercyon the Arcadian in a wrestling match, and, going on a little farther, in Ereneus he slew Damastes, otherwise called Procrustes, forcing his body of the size of his own bed, as he himself was used to do with all strangers. This he did in imitation of Hercules, who always returned upon his assailants the same sort of violence they offered to him. Sacrificed Busiris, killed Antaeus in wrestling, and Cycnus in single combat, and Tamaris by breaking his skull in pieces, whence, they say, comes the proverb of a Temerian mischief, for it seems that Termerus killed passengers that he met by running with his head against them, and so also Theseus proceeded in the punishment of evil men who underwent the same violence from him which they had inflicted upon others, justly suffering after the manner of their own injustice, as he went forward on his journey and was come as far as the river Cephisus. Some of the race of Phytelida met him and saluted him, and upon his desire to use the purifications then in custom, they performed them with all the usual ceremonies, and having offered propitiatory sacrifices to the entities, invited him and entertained him at their house, a kindness which, in all his journey hitherto, he had not met. On the 8th day of Cronius, now called Hecatombaan, he arrived at Athens, where he found the public affairs full of all confusion and divided into parties and factions. Augeas also, and his whole private family, laboring under the same distemper, for Medea, having fled from Corinth, and promised Augeas to make him, by her art, capable of having children, was living with him. Now, one of the things that I remember about the 8th day, the Christian New Year is called the Octave. And the Bible says that according to Jewish tradition, Jesus underwent ritual genital mutilation on the 8th day of life, and that's why they have, that's the symbolism of their New Year's Day, to call it, Christmas, and 7 days later, a rather unexpected thing to have as your a holiday, but she was first aware. That has nothing to do with this, other than on the 8th day of she was aware of Theseus, whom as yet Augeas did not know, and he being in years full of jealousies and suspicions, and fearing everything by reason of the faction that was then in the city, she easily persuaded him to kill by poison at a banquet, to which he was to be invited as a stranger. He, coming to this entertainment, thought it not fit to discover himself at once, but willing to give his father the occasion of first finding him out, the meat being on the table, he drew his sword as if he designed to cut it. Augeas, at once recognizing the token, threw down the cup of poison, and questioning his son, embraced him, and having gathered together all his citizens, owned him publicly before them, who, on their part, received him gladly for the fame of his greatness and bravery. And it is said that when the cup fell, the poison was split, where there now was, where now is the enclosed space in the Delphinium, for in that place stood Augus's house, and the figure of Mercury on the east side of the temple is called the Mercury of Augus's Gate. And in Islamic history, we find out that some of the people, some of Muhammad's closest friends and his nephew had gates. You know, they lived at the edge of the house of the worship, and you know, Ali was the only one that, you know, could regularly keep his gate open, per se. You know, the sons of Pallas, who, and you know, that practice was the thing. People want to live close to the house of worship, and some people literally, you know, I'll leave my home on this side, and I'm there. You know, the sons of Pallas, who before were quiet upon expectation of recovering the kingdom after Augustus's death, who was without issue as soon as Theseus appeared and was acknowledged the successor, highly resenting that Augustus first, an adopted son only of Pandion and not at all related to the family of Erechtheus, should be holding the kingdom, and that after him Theseus, a visitor and stranger, should be destined to succeed to it, broke out into open war, and dividing themselves into two companies, one part of them marched openly from Sphetus with their father against the city, the other hiding themselves in the village of Gargetus, lay in ambush with a design to set upon the enemy on both sides. They had with them a crier of the township of Agnus, named Leas, who discovered to Theseus all the designs of the Palantida. He immediately fell upon those that lay in ambuscade, and cut them all off. Upon tidings which, Pallas and his company fled and were dispersed. From hence, they say, is derived the custom among the people of the township of Pallene to have no marriages or any alliance with the people of Agnus, nor to suffer the criers to pronounce in their proclamations the words used by all other parts of the country. Acueta leoi, hear ye people, hating the very sign of